Welcome, Krista. Lovely to have you here. You just did a session, and for the people that see you on live stream or hear you speaking on the podcast, they might recognize you, since a lot of people, I assume, have watched some Google Analytics videos in the past, which you did a lot of. I think that must have been a great position to be in, and to be able to share and teach people to do what you do, what you love. But let's start with your session today. You had a keynote and you spoke about digital analytics trends, and talk about what's next in digital analytics. So, tell us what's next.
What I talked about is based on some research that I've been doing over the last month or two, just trying to understand kind of what are the platforms that people are using today to do analytics, what are they looking at tomorrow, kind of what is their game plan when it comes to how they are planning out their digital future for their businesses. And what I've been finding is, while a lot of people still use Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, some of the major providers as their primary platform, when it comes to secondary platforms, some of the smaller players are actually becoming much more popular. Things like Mixpanel and Heap and Amplitude, Segment, Snowplow. There's a bunch of things that are starting to pop up that we hadn't heard even a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think you showed a graph. I saw it on Twitter. But I think 80% of them use, of merchants and websites use the bigger names.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have 12.78% the smaller ones, and the rest is in-house.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think in-housing is another trend that we're starting to see. So I think, there was 7 or 8% that are using in-housing, kind of rolling their own analytics as a primary platform. But when it comes to secondary platforms, we're seeing it a lot more. So people are starting to use more than one analytics platform, and often we're seeing that as they start to do another type of platform, another type of data analysis, it's in-house, it's doing their own thing, it's getting those data pipelines together, and really figuring out how they can kind of take it to the next level with data science, data mining, ML, all of those kind of things.
Yeah. And what's driving this trend?
I think over the course of the research, the two biggest things that I saw, and these are actually kind of conflicting trends, is this desire to kind of do more yourself, own it in-house, and really be in control of your own data. And then the other trend I saw is actually a trend towards consolidation and people wanting to do it all in one platform, being able to see across web and app or cross-platform and those kind of things. So they're a little bit at odds, but I think the underlying sentiment in all of it is that people want to own their data. They want to be able to get that raw event data and analyze it the way that they want. Yep. And I think that the platforms that allow for that are the ones that are going to continue to be popular in the future.
Yeah, or not only just want to own their data, but with GDPR, especially here in Europe, they need to own
totally.
Part of the data. Yeah. That's an important driver.
And with all-in-one, you mean not only devices, but different browsers, different locations, work, home, everything combined?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're a very digital society. We have so many different ways of accessing this information, and it's really hard as a business to bring it all together, but certainly there's a desire to look at somebody as a user and throughout their entire user journey rather than just a single platform or browser window.
Yeah, you also spoke about a new feature in Google Analytics, combining web and app. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of my favorite things, something that I worked on for about 2 years before leaving Google earlier this year, is their new app and web properties. So I worked on it as a product manager and also as kind of that analytics advocate, helping people and understand what it is they are building and how it would be useful to users, or what were the types of things that we needed to consider as we started to build this new platform. It's exciting. It builds on the success of Google Analytics for Firebase and kind of completely flips that data model on its head. So it goes from a sessions and page view model that we had in kind of the traditional universal analytics or what we see in Google Analytics today, and it's moving more towards an event and parameter data model, which is what you actually see in some of the newer platforms like a Mixpanel and Amplitude, those types of things. We're looking at how that data can be more useful in the future. And it's really exciting. It works cross-platform. It takes that Google Analytics for Firebase data. It adds web streaming streams of data is what they're calling it, so you can have multiple different streams from iOS, Android, web. I suspect we'll see things for like single page apps and all of those types of things. And it brings it all together in one interface, one way to analyze it. And I think, this speaks to some of the trends that we're seeing in the data. One of the really exciting things of this new platform is actually it's all available via an export with BigQuery for free, as compared to the paid version of Google Analytics where you actually have to pay for that BigQuery export. So I think there's a lot of things that we're seeing here that are speaking to some of the trends in the data and where the industry is going.
Yeah, and so in that sense, do you think Google is Google catching up to the other competitors out there, or are they lagging behind, or?
Yeah, I think you can look at it in a number of ways.
Feature-wise,
Sure. It's a little bit of catching up in terms of that data model and that being the primary data model. But I also think it's one of the first platforms out there that truly is bringing together web and app in a way that you can actually analyze that data across everything. There are other platforms that have tried to do it. I think people have had varying degrees of success.
Yeah.
One of the things that sets Google apart is its ability to be able to map that user across a namespace.
It's hard to do, right? So
It's very hard to do, of course.
Yeah.
For years we've been saying, well, like, oh yeah, of course you can do it. You just need a user identifier. So if you have a login, that's great.
Yeah.
But most websites don't have a login, and
Exactly.
you need to really be able to, understand that. And so Google's doing some pretty cool things there to be able to make that much more accessible.
Yeah, and we spoke about it today a couple of times. So you advise companies on their analytics. What are the most common things that you see going wrong or suboptimal when you start with them?
One of the things that I actually I find more often than not is not necessarily that things are wrong or broken. They often are, but more that companies are not taking advantage of the platforms that they have.
Yep.
And I find it really funny because in today's businesses, we have more and more platforms, and we continue to buy and add to that marketing tech stack. And yet we're underutilizing the tools that we have. And even when it comes to something like Google Analytics, I've heard very large, premium 360 paying customers of Google Analytics say they had no idea they could create a custom segment, or what is a secondary dimension, or we're not using event tracking.
Yeah.
And it kind of blows my mind because these are very, fundamental ways to get more out of your analytics solution. And, in my mind, you shouldn't be investing further in other platforms and trying to pull so much data together until you're actually utilizing the platforms that you have.
Yeah, and do you feel this is more of a lack in technical knowledge, or is it more about the strategies, the goals within the company that might not be well defined?
I think it's both. I think you absolutely need to start with some type of business requirements and know what it is you're trying to track and why, and hopefully that leads into the types of tracking and things that you would implement to be able to answer those questions. But I think there's definitely a lack of knowledge. If you don't know that you can create a custom segment to be able to analyze that data,
Yep.
you're never going to be able to take your analysis to that next level.
Yeah, and
So they didn't watch your videos then?
I guess they haven't watched my videos yet, but
here's a link.
Yeah.
you can check out the Analytics Academy, check out all those videos to teach you how to do those kind of things. But there's so many free resources out there for analytics education. So I think the resources are there. There's still just a lack of kind of knowing that you need to take it to that next level. If you're not aware that these things exist, all the training in the world could be there, and yet you're not going to be able to actually utilize the tools. Somebody needs to tell you that it's there.
Well, especially I think with Google Analytics. For example, compared with something like Heap, they are recording all events right away after you install Heap. But with Google Analytics, you need to do still a lot of work to do before everything is set up right. The events, the e-commerce tracking. I work for a lot of merchants, so that's something you need to set up, and it's not always obvious and straightforward. So.
Yeah, so I think actually that's one of the really cool things that I'm excited about in the new app and web properties. So there's this new thing called enhanced measurement, where it's actually kind of out of the box. You can just toggle on and off a bunch of different events that will track then automatically once you flip that toggle. Yeah. And the entire goal is that they are trying to make it much more accessible and easy for people who are not as technical or don't have the resources to be able to set those things up. to do things like scroll tracking and outbound link tracking and search result tracking and those kind of things. And it's amazing that you can just kind of flip a switch and that's turned on now. And I think that list of things that you can do through enhanced measurement is going to continue to expand, and I'm really excited to see where they go with it.
That would be really helpful, because often you want to do an analysis of something that's not measured, and you still have to wait a couple of weeks to get the data in, instead of, we already have data from 3 years. That's nice.
It's probably going to be like this, and so now they're increasing the data, and then the next step is, all right, so we're going to teach you now what the useful data is to actually, so you can act upon it, and so it's probably going to increase and then decrease. That's the normal way it goes. But I'm happy if it would be a lot easier to track things that every normal people would like to track. I mean, we still run into e-commerce stores who can track the conversions, but don't have the order values, revenue, for example. It makes working on your CRO a lot harder.
Yeah, and then it also comes back to the strategy that the companies have. I also worked at a company where day one, it wasn't Google Analytics, but all the e-commerce managers for each country, they got a report based on order data, just the number of orders compared to what they budgeted for. So what are you going to act upon? I mean, if they just started giving out discounts, that's that's so painful. If the data is not there, and if everyone, the e-commerce manager, they knew they're not stupid, but if that's the data you get and what you talk about with your manager, then that's what you.
If that's what determines if you get your bonus or not, then you're going to give out discounts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Hey, I wonder a very practical question about the Google Analytics videos. How often did you guys have to redo those? Because maybe a personal frustration with Google Analytics. Well, it's not. It's also frustration, but also amazed by how much development it's continuously going through. I often find myself lost in Google Analytics because something changed again.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are parts of them that we've redone over the years. I think the Google Tag Manager course is probably the hardest one to keep up to date. And a lot of those updates came in the form of kind of text box telling you that this has changed. I definitely re-recorded scenes of several over time, but I think in general the most re-recording was just me stumbling over my words in the studio as we were filming the first ones. Had a very, very patient filming crew helping me, and we had a lot of fun in the studio doing those. Yeah.
What are the things you're looking forward to, let's say next year? What are the technological advancements in our field? What makes you excited?
Yeah, I'm very excited to see where Google goes with this new App+Web property. I think we're just at the beginning. There's a lot of things that aren't there yet. It doesn't have enhanced e-commerce yet, although it's coming soon. And
insider information.
So there's a lot of advancements that are going to come there that are helping to get to kind of that use case parity with universal analytics, and then taking it a step farther. I think there's a lot of new features that are App+Web only. So for example, the new analysis section that was available or is available in Google Analytics 360, there's some new techniques coming out to analyze your data, and they're coming first and primarily in the App+Web stuff. For example, the pathing reports, which were something that I worked on when I was at Google. I helped build that and launch it, and it was actually my personal motto to kill all of the old user reports, user flow reports from Google Analytics, because they were so terrible. So of course, because that was my motto, I got pathing handed to me as something I had to go figure out. But it's exciting.
You started complaining here. Make it better then.
Go fix it.
Pretty much, yeah. That's how Google works in general.
Let's do it.
But yeah, I'm excited for to see where that goes. On a more personal note, I'm excited to kind of really get back into doing digital analytics day to day. So I've recently started my own analytics consulting firm called KS Digital. And I'm excited to be helping companies really get into their digital strategy and analyze their Google Analytics data or whatever it might be, helping them understand those business requirements and get set up in a way that's going to be really fruitful for them.
Any specific type of clients or segments you're looking for, or?
I think
they're all listening. You can pitch yourself now.
It's a Dutch podcast, so
it depends on the business case. I think my strong suit really is around Google Analytics, but just digital strategy in general. So I'm looking for clients who are trying to do better with what they're doing online, and who may need help auditing what they're doing with Google Analytics and setting up a better implementation, setting up a better solution design, and really driving that forward.
Okay, cool. And you've been speaking a lot worldwide also. You travel to the Netherlands often. So are there big differences that you see in how people handle analytics or what we do in our general area where we work in? How people handle data? Of course, we have a lot less data. We tend to have less data here. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think I've seen some really interesting things worldwide. So when I was at Google, I spent 3 months over in Asia doing advocacy for data over there. I think a lot of those markets are a little less mature in how they're using analytics data specifically. I think some markets are much more mature.
Yep.
I think China is pretty mature with all the cameras they're building.
China's decently mature. I'm constantly surprised by actually the Australian market. I think that they in particular have gone really deep on just like data analysis and getting really technical with data. Okay. Almost as if they skipped the whole web analytics behavioral data side of things and dumped everything into a data warehouse, and you have to be very technical to be an analyst there. I think there are pros and cons to all of that, by the way. I think the most of the European market is kind of somewhere in the middle. I think they've started to progress pretty significantly, getting more technical. But I think that there's a strong kind of digital analytics offering here. I do think you get things like Gdpr, which takes away some of that data that you can have access to. But everybody is starting to feel the pains of that, along with other regulations being put in place. In the U.S., we have CCPA coming up.
Specifically California, is that right?
Well, it's a California regulation, but any business that does business with anybody in California has to comply. So basically, it's all of the U.S.
And just for me, what does it mean?
The California Consumer Privacy Act. So it's kind of the California version almost of GDPR, except for it's the inverse. You actually you don't have to get opt-in consent, it's opt-out consent.
Okay.
But you have to display a message on your website someplace basically saying that business has the right to sell your data, which is how they've worded it, something like that, which it's a little bit off-putting. So I'm curious to see kind of the impacts of that. But then on top of that, you have things like ITP and ETP now with Mozilla, where we're losing more and more data, and we have to figure out ways as analysts to work around that to get the things that we need, so that we can continue to do our jobs.
Yeah. Well, those messages might be off-putting, but we also have some experience here with GDPR, and before that we had a different cookie law. But once every website has it, as a user, you just
no one cares.
So the internet's really unusable in Europe, right?
It's really annoying. You just click accept.
Yeah, you click whatever they throw at you. You just click accept.
Yeah,
doesn't matter whether things are checked on or checked off or.
Yeah, we did. Of course, when you work for companies, they want as many people as possible to accept. Then you optimize for that, and then you get over 99% of people accepting, but that also kind of makes the law a bit useless.
Specifically, conversion optimization process for the cookie. The cookie banner popping up.
Yeah, that's an important one, right? Otherwise, you.
For sure. I did a lot of testing actually in a former role where we actually used something like a usertesting.com or Validately to go through so many different mocks of, acceptance of different cookie guidelines, and, went from very little acceptance to a place where we felt a little bit more comfortable as a business. But definitely something that you need to think about. Don't just slap something up there and hope that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. One of the themes today, diversity. What kind of segments do you see being very useful for clients to be looking at? Often clients, especially when they start out, just trying to optimize for the average user, which can be hard if there's no average.
Which is a big problem. Yeah.
Which can be it can be a big issue, or maybe even waste of time if there's no average user. What kind of segments do you often see being very useful for people in, for example, e-commerce?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is really going to depend on the business. Sometimes things like age and gender demographics help, and oftentimes they don't have any impact at all. It's a lot more about that user behavior on site, the things that they're looking at previously, the things they're, showing interest in are great signals for you to be able to then segment that user experience, offer them more personalized experiences, be able to remarket to those users. So I think, while surface level metrics can sometimes be useful, much more often it's really understanding, what are the major interests of people on your site, and go after those interests.
Yeah, and demographics can be tricky. I mean, we just had someone from Vodafone and Transavia airline saying, we look at Google Analytics demographics, but when we try to validate it, it doesn't
not
really
that accurate.
Yeah, I mean, demographic data is tough, right? Like, you have people who share browsers or computers and various things, and so that inferred data is going to be mixed. I've gotten nicely targeted ads to buy men's clothing, and I'm like, well, I searched to buy a shirt for my husband, but like I'm not a man, and I'm not necessarily looking for that ongoing. And so I think, you have to take that as a grain of salt or just one input into kind of the overall segment that you're building.
Yeah, a lot of companies do it, right? So if you start optimizing, you start creating those segments, and in this case, if someone's looking for men clothing, probably a man, but maybe that's the bulk of the group. But then, of course, you miss out a lot of people that are
looking for presents.
Yeah, looking for presents. And so, I, for example, I worked at a flower company. It was 98% gifting. So someone could... yeah, that too. It was a Swedish company, actually. But it was really hard to optimize for that person, because this week they would buy something for their mother, for a lover, for, I don't know, funerals we also did. So yeah, if it's gifting, it's really hard to optimize for that. I mean, they can have a favorite flower themselves. Doesn't mean
you definitely don't want to remarket to somebody in the market for funeral flowers.
No, exactly. That's I mean that's
that would be awkward.
Yeah, and it's and something like Valentine's Day or Mother's Day, you can do that something the year after, but not for funerals. Hopefully that will. Yeah, that's different.
And something I'm curious about. How do you feel about using? Can you create like standardized personas in Google Analytics, and do you think it's useful, like Heisenberg, or I just opened it, Myers-Briggs types indicators, things like that? What's your opinion about that?
I mean, sure, you can create very detailed segments of the types of users that you're looking for in Google Analytics. You can, if you have the 360 version or something, you can upload a lot of that data back in if you're doing it in, a data warehouse and BigQuery, something like that. But I think it's the application of those segments that's the really important thing, right? So what are you actually using them for besides just analysis of your data? How can you be a little bit more proactive with those segments of data? I think, personalization when it comes to A/B testing solutions, you can share those same segments from Google Analytics into Google Optimize, for example, and then personalize towards a persona that you've built out. I think personas can also be really, really useful, not just in your online, analysis and marketing, but also in your product development, right? Understanding that data that you have and then using that to help guide how to make a better product for various personas. So yes, I think you can do it. I think it's the application of what you're using that for that's more important there.
Yeah, but I think that's a big challenge for a lot of customers, right? Trying to figure out which segments make sense.
Yeah,
as a psychologist, I have an opinion on Myers-Briggs.
No, but the idea behind the question was a lot of companies don't actually have a persona of their customers, right? Yeah. They segment it in like small or big, or but not really like focused on interest or something. So they usually refer to standardized personas in that way.
So you want to the other way around, but a really data-driven way to create personas based on Google Analytics data.
For example.
Yeah, that would be nice.
It would be nice. I mean, I think it's only one part of the input, right? So much of persona building is around the qualitative input. Can you do some of that with Google Analytics? Can you get your qualitative data into GA? Yeah, you can. There's many ways of doing that. Google Surveys is a great option. They're working on some cool stuff there. But I think it's all of the inputs that go into it, and your quantitative web analytics data is only one part of what a persona can be.
Yeah.
I led a year-long persona segmentation project when I was at Google, actually, and the GA data certainly was a big input, but it was very much paired with a lot of qualitative input, both in terms of survey data and diary studies, and then there was some log file analysis and Google Analytics data, and kind of all of that helped us put together kind of who our personas were based on a lot of different aspects, and that then helped us to build the next iteration of Google Analytics.
Yeah, and then again, it can be, there are a lot of situational aspects. Again with example of the flowers, you can target me as a persona, but if I'm buying for someone else, there's some of course there might be something that are that can be helpful in the way I buy things, but that might be helpful. But still, there might be different situations where someone is in, or I also see usually a lot of a big difference between people shopping during working hours or outside of that, or weekends. The persona is probably the same, but they act differently.
Yeah, but they're a generalization, right? We accept that it's a model, and a model is never accurate.
Yeah.
But I think it could help companies who are just starting out, basically trying to use their data in some way. Maybe even after doing the first ever check if the data is actually being collected, to start out and to try and understand what you can do with it, and maybe advance from there.
And I think, a really cool opportunity maybe for Google is to start thinking along those lines when it comes to their intelligence tools that they're building into Google Analytics, right? The insights cards, the intelligence. Can we intelligently tell you about, a unique segment that we found and how that behavior differs from others, and, help build those out into personas. So I'm happy to pass that along to the team.
I mean, but it would be awesome if then for Google's sake, if you then can connect it to Google Ads, basically the analytics is telling you which segment is highly profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the whole reason Google Analytics exists, is because of Google AdWords, right? So
but if Google can more or less automate that, or more specifically do it in the outliers, that would be helpful.
Yeah, but Google Analytics Insights also already partially doing that, right? Looking at segments, notifying you of weird behavior.
It's getting better. It's a multi-year project to really build that out into something that's very useful. But even I myself am surprised sometimes by the really interesting insights that I'm starting to get there, and I know it's only going to get better.
Those are the great insights, right? Whether you're doing qualitative or quantitative research, if you think,
totally, actually, the PM for the Insights product actually just pinged me last night about some new stuff that they've got coming down the pipe. So I'm pretty excited for that to come out.
Cool. Thank you so much. Anything? Where do you get your inspiration from, work-wise?
I've got a really great group of friends that are kind of in the analytics, digital, marketing space, and I get a lot of inspiration from them, from just hanging out, from being at conferences and networking, from reading a lot of the new stuff coming out. I think there are some really prolific bloggers in our industry, and I get a lot of inspiration from them. I think there's a lot of places to get that inspiration. I think it's what you actually do with it, and kind of how you turn that around into, a blog post or some, social outreach or a business idea is really the important thing to take away there. Yeah.
So friends in the industry, husband in the industry. Ask Martijn in the podcast. Do you guys talk about something differently at home? But it's mainly.
No, every once in a while he's like, "Okay, we're gonna have a Google Analytics session," and I'm like, "Oh, great."
But it's Sunday. Can we please do this another time? Yeah. Anything fun you guys are doing here in the Netherlands?
We're visiting family, so seeing the parentals. Gonna spend a couple days hanging out in Amsterdam too. Unfortunately, you guys didn't bring us some nice weather though this trip.
No, that's.
No, sorry. Yeah, we forgot.
I just came from Switzerland. It was worse there. So.
It's small comfort.
Yeah. Very small comfort.
Yeah.
And you wonder why we live in California.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Krista, thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
You're welcome.